Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Detroit, there is a lot happening beneath the surface of this roster right now, and honestly, some of it should make you a little nervous. A Super Bowl champion just went on record naming exactly why the pressure is mounting on Dan Campbell heading into this season. A genuine fan favorite might be getting squeezed off this roster entirely in a decision that is going to sting. A late-round rookie is already showing off happening with your Detroit Lions right now. This is Detroit Focus. Let's start with some richly deserved praise, because Amon-Ra St. just continued his climb up ESPN's ongoing series, ranking the very best players at every position across the entire NFL, checking in at number 5 among all wide receivers in football. And when you actually look at the company he's keeping on that list, that placement should feel like an honor, not a snub. Anonymous league executives who contributed to the ranking praised him directly, describing him as a savvy route runner who consistently gets open and plays significantly faster than his actual timed speed would suggest. One anonymous coordinator went even further, explaining that St. Brown is where everyone in the building knows he isn't going vertical, praising his unique feel for working leverage against defenders, his sheer physical strength at the catch point, and his shiftiness after the catch. And here's the line that says it all, the observation. But let's be real here. Being ranked as the 5th best receiver in the entire National Football League, ahead of dozens of legitimate stars across this league, is nothing short of an elite distinction. This is not a snub. This is confirmation of exactly what Lions fans have known for years, that Amon-Ra St. belongs firmly in the conversation among the very best receivers alive. And he isn't the only receiver from this roster getting national love either. Jameson Williams didn't quite crack that top 10 list, but he was named among just 6 receivers league-wide to receive legitimate honorable mention recognition, which, given how loaded this receiver landscape has become across the NFL, is still a genuinely impressive distinction. The scouting report on him was glowing in its own right, with one anonymous executive praising his pure speed and elusiveness, explaining that his blazing pace alone opens up an entire route tree of intermediate options that simply wouldn't exist for a less explosive athlete. The same evaluator did note that breaking in and out of his cuts wasn't always the most natural part of his game early on, but credited him with real, tangible growth in that exact area, along with praise for his willingness to attack every blade of grass across the width of the field. The one lingering knock mentioned was hand consistency, but even with that caveat attached, the evaluation still landed on the same conclusion: a genuinely good, difference-making player. Between St. Brown and Williams, it's becoming impossible to argue against the idea that Detroit is sitting on one of the deepest, most talented receiver rooms in all of professional football, a room that could realistically make a real impact playing for almost any other franchise in this league. Now let's get into the story that has genuinely got people buzzing, because a Super Bowl champion just came out and explained exactly why real pressure is mounting on Dan Campbell heading into this season, and honestly, the reasoning behind it is hard to argue with. Mark Schlereth, someone whose football opinion carries serious weight, laid out his case clearly, acknowledging up front that there is no question real pressure now sits on Campbell's shoulders. But here's the important nuance in his argument, that pressure exists specifically because of how genuinely talented this roster is, not because of any glaring deficiency in coaching. Schlereth pointed directly to Jared Goff, calling him a legitimate top 5 or 6 quarterback in the entire NFL. He praised Penei Sewell as arguably the single most talented offensive lineman in all of football, going as far as relaying that even Dan Campbell himself has called Sewell not just the best lineman on this roster, but the single most talented football player on the entire team, period. Schlereth continued building his case, pointing to Jameson Williams at receiver, to Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, to the production this team has gotten out of the tight end position, and of course circling back once more to Amon-Ra St. praising him not just as one of the best receivers in football, but specifically for doing the dirty, unglamorous work, setting physical tone and drawing direct comparisons to old school. Tone-setting receivers like Steve Smith and Hines Ward, guys who made their names getting down in the trenches, absorbing contact on tough intermediate catches, and setting the physical identity for their entire offense. That comparison is not just flattering, it's dead accurate, and it's exactly the kind of praise that should make every Lions fan proud of what this receiver room has become. So yes, the pressure is real, and it's legitimate. When you're sitting on this much star power across the offensive side of the ball, results become the expectation, not the hope. But let's not blow this out of proportion either. This is not some must-win, seat is on fire situation for Dan Campbell. This is a coach who has delivered 3, arguably damn near 4, consecutive winning seasons for a franchise that spent decades drowning in bad coaching hires and worse front office decisions before he arrived. Missing the playoffs last season stings, no doubt, but nobody rational believes Campbell's job security is genuinely at risk even if this team stumbles again. If anything, the heavier burden of pressure this offseason probably sits with Brad Holmes and the job he's done building out the defensive talent on this roster, because the offensive machine Campbell is running has already proven it can compete with anybody in football. Let's shift over to the rookie who has been quietly turning heads on social media, defensive authority along the defensive line. Wanting players capable of kicking inside to interior spots or bumping outside to the edge depending on the package being run. That kind of positional flexibility has become a real cornerstone of how Detroit wants to build out its front seven, and Gilliam-Howard's frame and athletic profile fit right into that vision on paper. But here's the reality check that has to come with all this hype, and it's an important one. Flashing elite athletic testing numbers on an Instagram reel is a completely different challenge than translating that same explosiveness onto the practice field against real competition and eventually onto Ford Field itself during preseason action. As a later-round rookie stepping into an already crowded, talent-rich defensive line room, the margin for error here is thin. There's plenty to genuinely like about his energy, his attitude, and the physical upside baked into his frame, but none of that guarantees anything close to a roster spot yet. If he can translate the flash into real, consistent production once pads come on and preseason games start counting, there's a path to the 53-man roster. If not, the far more likely outcome is a landing spot on the practice squad, which, to be completely honest, is not remotely the disappointing outcome it used to be perceived as around this league. And speaking of tough roster decisions, let's talk about the fan favorite who might genuinely be squeezed off this roster entirely in what is shaping up to be one of the more difficult calls of this entire summer. According to respected insider reporting, this front office may simply be unable to find a spot for a 5th receiver on the final roster, and that painful reality could cost a well-liked player his job in Detroit. The breakdown here suggests one familiar name is trending firmly toward the practice squad rather than the active roster, while another player brings some intriguing trick play appeal given his background at quarterback. Though the belief is that appeal alone likely won't be enough to save a roster spot. Meanwhile, a dependable gunner on special teams may have found his path blocked entirely once this year's draft class brought in a rookie return specialist, effectively squeezing him out of the picture. And in an interesting twist, another depth receiver reportedly turned in strong enough reps throughout organized team activities and minicamp that he might actually sneak onto the roster ahead of names fans would have assumed were safer bets. Here's the thing worth sitting with for a second, though, and it genuinely reframes how we should all be thinking about roster cuts in this current era of the league. Missing the actual 53-man roster simply does not carry the same devastating weight it used to. The practice squad in this league right now functions almost identically to a real roster spot in terms of actual game week utilization, especially for a franchise like Detroit that deals with a near-constant rotation of injuries throughout the season. The only meaningful differences at this point are the paycheck and, in some cases, the total number of live reps a player gets on Sundays. But plenty of true active roster backups barely see the field anyway. So while losing a spot on the initial 53 might sting from a pride standpoint, functionally speaking, a fan favorite landing on the practice squad instead of getting released outright is genuinely not the disaster it would have been perceived as just a handful of years ago. The roster, in a very real sense, now extends well past that magic number 53, and that softens the blow considerably. Now let's wrap things up with a genuinely fun question worth chewing on. Because when you ask people to name the most underrated free agent addition this franchise made this offseason, the conversation gets interesting fast. There's a strong case building around receiver Greg Dortch, who is currently projected to line up as this team's fourth receiver behind St. Brown, Williams, and the rest of that talented room, while also being heavily expected to handle primary punt and kick return duties this season. And that dual threat value is exactly what makes him so easy to overlook and so valuable at the same time. Remember what a difference maker Khalif Raymond became once he found his footing in Detroit, the small, compact, do-everything Swiss Army knife type of player who found ways to consistently impact winnable moments. The genuine belief here is that Dortch might end up being an even younger, faster, more explosive version of exactly that archetype. He didn't sign for premium money, he isn't dominating headlines, and he barely gets mentioned in broader roster conversations right now. But between his special teams value and his potential offensive utility as a shifty complementary piece, this profile fits the exact blueprint of a signing that quietly over-delivers once the season actually kicks off. Keep his name in the back of your mind because by midseason, there's a real chance he's a name every Lions fan is talking about. So here's where this all leaves us. Amon-Ra St. Brown continuing to earn every bit of national respect he's due, with Jameson Williams right there climbing up behind him. Real, legitimate pressure building on Dan Campbell this season, driven not by a lack of talent, but by an abundance of it, with expectations to match. A promising rookie flashing elite athletic tools that still need to translate onto the actual field to matter. A beloved player potentially squeezed off the 53-man roster in a decision that will sting even if the practice squad softens the blow. And a quietly explosive free agent signing in Greg Dortch, who might just be this offseason's best-kept secret. This roster is packed with storylines heading into training camp, and every single one of them is worth watching closely. This is exactly the kind of deep-dive breakdown we bring you here on Detroit Focus every single time. So if you're fired up about St. Brown's ranking, if you've got a different take on where the pressure on this coaching staff should really sit, or if you've got your own pick for this team's most underrated free agent signing, drop it in the comments right now. We genuinely want to hear it. Smash that like button before you go, and if you haven't already subscribed and turned on that notification bell, get that done right now because we'll be tracking every single storyline through training camp and beyond all season long. Thanks so much for watching, Lions fans. We'll see you in the next one.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.